Hello, everybody. Tonight we're discussing Chapter 12, Miracles. And this is based on a book that I wrote called Befriend God, Life with Jesus. But a little change of pace tonight. I'm going to cover the material in the book in a different way. I'm going to talk about it from personal experience. Rather than talking about the miracles that Jesus did, which I strongly recommend you familiarize yourself with and relate to, and even come to expect to participate in those kind of miracles in your life, and you will if you really put your life in His hands, because that's what's happened to me. I have been experiencing miracles in my life, and I want to share them with you. So that's what I'm going to talk about. First of all, I broke miracles down into three categories: healing miracles, which can be physical healing, or they can be spiritual healing. Then there's miracles of nature, the natural order doing something very unusual, different, unexpected, or even impossible at times. And then lastly, the miracle that we're all going to experience sooner or later is the miracle of resurrection. We're going to be raised up. I do believe that we have an immortal spark in us, a piece of the divine in us, but I don't believe that we are immortal creatures. We aren't just necessarily bound to live forever and ever and ever and never die. And what Jesus came into this world, one of the big things that He did was to offer us not just the possibility, but the promised assurance that we can live with Him and all the saints and God in heaven forever and ever. That's the really big miracle, that no matter how weak, sorry, wretched, terrible, unworthy we are, through Him, we can have resurrected life, raised up to heaven. I want to begin with healing miracles. I'm going to start with physical miracles. A few years ago, I went on a mission trip with a group of about 30 Americans to Peru. We started in northeastern Peru in a city called Iquitos. And we boarded a large riverboat, which was to be our home for about 7 or 8 days. And we traveled east on the Amazon River, and the people that had planned this trip, the Peruvians, planned it so that we would be visiting villages which, as far as they knew, had rarely or had never been visited before, and certainly not by a group of missionaries. I want to explain the missionaries that group we were in. It was a medical mission. Everybody that went on this trip, and it also included a bunch of Peruvian doctors, pharmacists, nurses, translators, etc. So it's a big group of us. It was a medical mission. They were all medical people except one, me. I was the evangelist. And we would go to a village, the doctors, nurses, and people would set up, they had it all planned out and had a big procedure, beginning with, they would do the people's history and medical history as a big intake thing, and then they would be examined, thoroughly examined by nurses and doctors, and then they would go see specialists, and then after all that, they may be prescribed medicines, and we had a full pharmacy, and we had pharmacists, and they would be given the pharmaceuticals and instructed on how to take them. And then they were sent before they could leave. So this whole process, I mean, a person took them, an hour or two to go through all this. And then the last thing they had to go through before they could leave was me. And what I did was I explained the gospel to them in groups of 6 or 8 people. And I had a translator because I didn't speak Spanish well, and none of them spoke English at all. So I saw everybody in the whole village, each village we went to, and I would go through the gospel. I had a little aid, a little visual aid that I used going through the New and set them on their way. Then I had the people left, and I'd say, how many of you would like to know Jesus today? And several of those people would raise their hand, and I'd pray for them and send them on their way. And then the remaining people, I would say a prayer for them, and then send them on the way. And then I had the next group. I had about 30 minutes with each group, and I would see a little less than 100 up to 150 people every day doing the same thing. Then by that time, it was evening. We would go back to our boat, and the crew would set up a screen on the shore and a projector, and they would see the Jesus movie. Then that would be taken down, and we would go on our way on the Amazon going east to the next village, which we would arrive at sometime early in the morning and do the same procedure. Wonderful people, wonderful experience, exhausting. None of us had any trouble going to bed at night. We were all, when we hit the pillow, we were gone, and we were up early in the morning, do it all over again. On the last day, went to a village whose name was Nuevo Esperanza, which means new hope. And there was something very, very special about that village. When I got off the ship and was announced that I was the pastor, the whole village was there. And I was like, wow, I never got cheered for before in my life for anything. People were all cheering because I'm a pastor. So they never had a pastor in their village. And they were wonderful people. The medical people did their thing with all these people, and I, talked to them, and the response was overwhelming that they knew Jesus and stuff. And at the end of it, in the late afternoon, when we were getting to leave and we were packing up, they said, "No, we want to have church with you. We want to worship with you." And so we the missionaries had a little powwow, and it was our last, not our last day in the Amazon, but the next day we're going back to Iquitos, a very long journey back to Iquitos, and we're going to go to any more villages. So this is our last village. And we knew these people were really special and very enthusiastic about the gospel. So we decided to have church with them and not have dinner and not get back on our boat, although it was getting dark. So they said, well, we have a place to meet. So they let us off on a journey of a mile or two through the jungle. Now, keep in mind, other than a few handheld flashlights, we're in the jungle, in the Amazon, and a world that we are completely unfamiliar with a group of complete strangers. So we scared, maybe, nervous, definitely, leery, yeah, where are we going? So we finally end up at a thatched roof. This was their house of worship, was a large thatched roof. No walls, no floor, no chairs or anything, just this thatched roof. And there was a man with a homemade conga drum, which was a hollowed out log with a skin over it, and a man with a homemade guitar, which was a wooden box, a homemade wooden box with a neck with 4 strings on it made out of string. And so they started playing, and it was actually pretty good stuff considering the instruments. And then people started singing, and then people started dancing, and it built and got more and more intense. And we were all getting kind of caught up in it. And someone came up to me, now it's time for you to preach, they said to me. And I thought, oh man, I don't know what to do, because I'd lost my translator. And there was no way, I mean, my little bit of rudimentary Spanish, was no way I was going to be able to do a sermon. And I got up there and I preached for half an hour, all in Spanish. And afterwards, everyone told me it was like a beautiful sermon. My Spanish was perfect and it was wonderful. And I was like, wow, thank you, Jesus. Because it's like, I couldn't believe it, because like, I didn't know Spanish yet. I preached a whole sermon in Spanish for a half an hour, and everybody said it was the people that spoke Spanish, many of them did, you know, like, it was great sermon and stuff. And I was like, what can I say? Thank you, Jesus. And then they said, now that you've preached, it's time for prayer. So everybody started praying. Now, many people in this village had physical problems. There were people who had never walked as an adult, and their legs were all paralyzed and the muscles were all atrophied. There was deaf people, blind people, people with gigantic tumorous growths coming out of their neck and their stomach and stuff like that. A lot of infirmities. And the doctors would join the villagers, and they would go around an individual and they would all lay hands on them and they would pray. And then the doctors would come over to me and go, Pastor, what's going on here? That man who hasn't walked in 30 years is now dancing. That woman who was totally deaf now can hear everything. That man who was completely blind all of his life from birth, now he sees. I've seen, the doctors that come up to me, I've seen tumors, gigantic tumors, the size of, like, you know, a softball, you know, just shrink up and disappear off people's bodies. He said, the doctors, these are American doctors, not religious people, not people of any tremendous, huge faith or anything, but people that absolutely believe in science, who had never seen anything like this in their lives, are like losing their minds, and they're all coming to me to explain it. And of course, I had the perfect explanation. I'd say, it's God. God's doing this. We aren't doing this. You're not doing this. Don't worry. You're not doing it. I'm not doing it. God's doing it. God is working here tonight. Everybody in that village was healed. Every single person, every child, every woman, every man, every elderly person was healed. And this went on for hours. Tremendous rejoicing. We all knew that what we had experienced was the most amazing thing that any of us had ever experienced in our whole lives. I want to tell you, we were all sober. None of us had taken any drugs. I mean, we all saw this, and we were all comparing notes. I mean, we were all comparing notes because we just couldn't believe what was going on. And when we walked back to the ship, back through the jungle, a mile or two back through the jungle in the dark, total silence. Nobody knew what to say. And someone said aloud, God, could you give us a sign that you're with us? And at that very moment, a huge meteor went through the Southern Cross. In the Northern Hemisphere, we have the Milky Way pointing to the pole star. In the Southern sky, they have the Southern Cross, which is a perfect little cross up in the sky. And anybody who's been south of the equator is familiar with the Southern Cross in the sky. It's very prominent. And this meteor just like went right through it, right after the guy said, and I said, don't ask for any more signs. That's good enough. And everyone like, yeah, whoa. And we got on the ship in silence, and we had our dinner many hours late, and we went to bed. And the next day, all we could talk about was like, nobody's going to believe it. Nobody's going to believe it. You know, and the doctors were all saying, I've been a doctor all my life. I've never seen anything like it. And I can't tell anybody when I go home because they won't believe me. They just won't believe me, you know? Anyhow, I didn't talk about that, what I'm just telling you now, for a long time, because I just didn't want to lose my credibility. I thought, oh, he's making that stuff up, that's the kind of stuff they say on TV, but it's not real, it is real. I have individually in my ministry experienced many kinds of healings. I could go on for the next hour telling you stories about miraculous physical healings that I have been a part of and that I've personally experienced. Spiritual healings. In the Enlightenment, the whole idea of demons and evil spirits was thrown out the window, and that became during the period of Enlightenment up into our times. That's all crazy talks. It's not real. There's no such thing, except that it is real. It really is real. And a man that I admire enormously, who I think is an absolute authority on healing, and particularly on spiritual healing, his name is Francis McNutt. And he was a Catholic priest for most of his life. He had a healing ministry, and he traveled all over the world. And he gave talks to all kinds of Christian groups, like to Catholic bishops and to, the collected, clergy of the Episcopal Church and Methodist Church and Assemblies of God. And all. I mean, he was very highly respected, and he did these healings all over the world. And he, in his ministry, was responsible for the healing of thousands of people, both physical and spiritual. And he's written many books, and I highly recommend you read Francis McNutt, MacNutt. And the book his most popular book and a really good introduction to Francis McNutt is called Healing. McNutt says, and I'm basing what I'm saying about spiritual healing on Francis McNutt because he knows far more about it than I do. Demonic possession is very, very rare. And when people think of demonic possession, they think of like the movies that they've seen where people, like levitate and spew, split pea soup, which looks like some kind of foul, violent stuff like that. But he says that stuff is very, very rare. What is common, very common, is demonic oppression, where the demonic spirits, demonic influences are trying to influence us and even sometimes have some control over our behavior. And McNutt lays out in his book how to drive that demonic influence out of your mind, out of your heart, out of your spirit, out of your life, out of your home, and permanently get rid of it. Gone. And he lays it all out. And I urge you to look at it. I have personally exorcised demons out of people's homes following what I've learned about demonic oppression, and it's been very effective, and the people have all told me afterwards, and even years afterwards, that they've been free of those things that were really ruining their lives and ruining their families. And I've also been part of laying on of hands and praying over people physically to rid them of demonic oppression. There's a lot of it around, a lot more than I had ever even imagined. But once I read McNutt's book, I became more aware of it. In my near-death experience afterwards, I was able to see both angelic beings and demonic beings. And it wasn't something that I had sought, and it wasn't something voluntary, but I could just see it. And there's a lot of, and I do not choose to see those things anymore because I think through discernment, I can be aware of it without having to really be so distracted by it, because it can be extremely distracting, because it's uh, overwhelming when you see it around you. So I'm going to move on. Jesus did amazing things with nature. Like he could calm the sea. He could take a handful of loaves of bread and fishes and multiply them and feed 5,000 men, plus the women, plus the children. The number that were given, feeding of the 5,000, that's just 5,000 men. It's they didn't count the number of women and children, because in those days women and children didn't count that much. But I mean, this is a huge crowd, probably more like 10,000, and he fed them all based on a handful of loaves and fishes. You know, how can you do that kind of thing? But there are many, many instances in the world that people have collectively prayed that a storm would pass them by. And against all probability, it did pass them by. People collectively have prayed for rain and they have received the rain. There are many instances where people have been the recipient of a miracle of nature through prayer. And there are lots of stories about that. I want to tell you a quick one that isn't about natural forces, but it's in a way I think it is about nature, the nature of people. In the Congo, in Africa, there was an event in around 1960 called the Mao Mao Rebellion. And the Mao Mao movement was that the white men were evil and that the Africans were going to eradicate them from Africa, eradicate them from the Congo. And so these groups of Mau Maus, large groups, hundreds of them, would get together, and with their machetes, whenever they came upon white farmers, anything inhabited by white people in Africa, they would slaughter them with the machetes. And it's really a very, very terrible period. There was a group of missionaries. They had a school, they had a church, they had a hospital in a very, very remote part of the Congo. And they were hearing rumors about the Mau Mau and what they were doing to the Europeans, to the whites. And they were afraid. And the churches that supported these missionaries also were getting word about what was going on in the Congo with the Mau Maus. So they began to have prayer vigils where people would go to church and someone would be in the church 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, they worked it in shifts. No one person was there for 24 hours. They had shifts of prayer warriors, and they would go in and just pray for the missionaries, pray for their safety. One night, the Mau Mau came to that compound of hospitals, schools, missionaries, church, of mostly Europeans, but also native Congolese people. And they left and never touched anyone in that little community. Of course, there was much rejoicing amongst the missionaries because they had been unharmed, but they couldn't understand it because they'd been surrounded by hundreds and hundreds of Mau Maus with machetes, screaming and yelling and chanting, vicious things. Eventually, the government caught up with some of these people and arrested them. And in time and interrogating them, they asked them, why did you surround this village of missionaries, stay there all night, shouting threats, and then leave? Why didn't you attack them? I mean, you way outnumbered them. You could have slaughtered them all very easily. And the Mau Mau said, the gigantic white angels with the flaming swords. And they said, what giant white angels were the flaming swords? And they said, there was a wall of angels 20 feet high all around the compound, and we went all over trying to get through the angels, and we couldn't find a way through, and they were waving these flaming swords, and we just had our machetes and we couldn't fight them. That's why they didn't attack, because they couldn't get in, because of this. It was because of the prayers of the missionaries and the prayers of the people back who had supported them in their mission work back in the States with their prayer vigils that had saved their lives. And that's what all the Mao Mao that they captured and interrogated, they all said the same story. They couldn't get through the angels to attack them. So this is the battle between, the reason why I call it nature is the battle between the human nature and the supernatural, the supernature of God protecting these people. I was in California doing a TV show, and I was in the green room waiting to go on actually in the green room for 3 hours waiting to go on. And one of the other men in the green room, we got talking. He was a boy, one of the children of one of the missionaries in that village. And he told me the story in the green room. He was there. He saw it with his own eyes. He experienced it. It's not a story that somebody made up and put in, a book somewhere. This is real stuff. It's absolutely. I had read that story sometime years before. I didn't tell him I'd read the story. I'd asked him about what his life was like growing up in the Congo and stuff like that. And he told me the whole thing from the perspective of someone who had been there. The people in the compound did not see the angels. They only heard about it later. They just prayed their hearts out. Moving on. Oh, yeah, I've got time. I got one more little story of nature. In 1955, I was a little boy, 9 years old, with my 2 sisters and my mother, and we had a little house on the beach on Cape Cod. Our house was maybe 100 yards from the ocean. And the house was basically at the same level as the ocean. I mean, we're like, there's just a few sand dunes between us and the ocean. And in the fall, my grandfather had a 70th birthday party. And my mother that year had gotten in a car, an old car, and we drove from the Cape to Boston for my grandfather's 70th birthday party, which was the next day. That day, Hurricane Carol came and wiped out a lot of houses on the Cape, including our house. And if we had been in that house, since in those days there was no warning, I mean, the weather would just get worse and worse, and then all of a sudden, the worst would just get terrible. And then afterwards, they would announce, oh, that was a hurricane. But there was no hurricane warnings in those days. We would have all died. God spared me, my sisters, and my mom from that hurricane through this desire to go to my grandfather's 70th birthday, 100 miles away, the safety of Boston. God works in miraculous ways. A few houses down from us, another house with a family of 6, they're all killed by the same hurricane on that day. So I thank God that although nature sometimes runs its course, God finds ways to save people. And the ultimate miracle, resurrection. Why did God create us in the first place? Why does God love us? Why does God want us to be with God in heaven forever? And I can answer that by going back through the three questions. God created us to love us and for us to love God. God created us to be with God in heaven forever and to grow in our love of God. God loves us even in our flawed state of being human and has shown us the way to strive towards holiness. And when we go to heaven, we will grow in holiness and become perfectly holy, like Christ in heaven. This is the ultimate miracle. Jesus, people say, why did Jesus have to die on the cross? Well, he did it for some good reasons. And one of the reasons is that when he did it, he defeated the power of sin and death in his, what we call his atonement. He defeated the power of sin and death so that we could go to heaven and be with him forever. The cross represents God's victory over the power of sin and death. Jesus did that to defeat those powers which had dominated this world. And sadly, for many people who have not put their faith in Jesus and have no hope of eternal life in heaven, they are still under the power of sin and death. And that's one of the things that really motivates me to want to spread the word of Jesus Christ, is I want them to be free of that. The power of sin and death is really slavery to something that you don't have to be a slave to. And we can live more freely. We have more choices. We have a much more expansive life when we give ourselves over to the love of God. So although the cross is gruesome and horrible, it also represents the incredible love of God, that he would be willing to go through that torment for our sake so that we will not go through that kind of torment. And we don't have to live that way. So people talk about salvation and being saved. And the Bible says, today is the day of salvation. And I would like to say to you, now is the day of salvation. Now is the moment of salvation. When you let go and free yourself of the power of sin and death by accepting Jesus's power in your life, you have a whole new life. We talk about being born again. It is like being born again. It's like having a whole new understanding of life, a whole new world view of life, a whole new perspective. Like before, when you are bound by the power of sin and death, it's like you're always got your eyes on the ground. When you're freed of that, you look up and you see the whole horizon. And you know what? The horizon isn't just 11 miles out there as far as you can see. The horizon goes on forever. It's vast, you know, through the sky into infinity and beyond. It's the most miraculous and wonderful experience of your life. It's the big miracle. You know, these miracles of physical healing, spiritual healing, healing in nature, healing, being saved from catastrophic situations. Those are all wonderful and those are all good. But those aren't the big miracles. Those are little miracles. The big miracle is we, as unworthy as we might be, go to heaven. We are made worthy by Jesus on that cross. saying, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Him telling us, if you put your faith in me, I will come to you and take you to where I am. That's the big miracle of life. And I hope and pray that every single one of you will not only experience that miracle, but be confident of that miracle right now in your life and let go of the power that oppresses us. So I hope you enjoyed this talk. I followed the book in its themes, but I presented it in a different way because I wanted to let you know that miracles aren't just like something that happens in fairy tales or in or did happen like 2,000 years ago, or happens to somebody else and you hear about it on TV or whatever. Miracles are real, and they happen to real people, and they happen every day all over the world. Like I said, I could go on and on and on and on with miracles that I personally have seen and been a part of. And you know, I would love to give you names and telephone numbers of people that you could call, but I can't do, as a pastor, that's, you can't do that kind of thing. But trust me, they're all over the place. So may God bless you, and may you experience many miracles of love and joy and faith in your life today.
Thank you, Howard. I could hear you go on and on and on, and I hope maybe we can do more shows on miracles. That was incredible. I thank you, Howard. That was phenomenal.
Have you ever heard any of this? Have I ever told you?
You've never told me. I'm still, my jaw still dropped. I'm speechless. That's amazing. I think I want to thank all our listeners too. It's really wonderful to have all their supportive comments and know they're there. The one real miracle is the fact that Howard and I, two technical troglodytes, don't even have a cell phone.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
and I've never done YouTube videos before, and Howard's, we're not the computers that somehow miraculously were able to create these videos. That God gave us the ability to figure out how to do it, to do Zoom and a YouTube video and upload files. So thank you so much.
Are the numbers still good on the viewing and stuff like that? Or?
Got great numbers, Howard. Absolutely.
Okay, good.
And I want to let our wonderful audience know just a couple things. We won't be having a video next week, but we'll be back on track in 2 weeks. And also, I apologize in advance if there's any deviation in technical quality. We're doing the best we can with these internet connections, but I just keep praying intently and saying, Lord, please help this internet connection stay up. And I don't think we've missed a single one of your words, Howard, but if there's kind of a deviation here and there, I just want to apologize to our listeners that we're praying and doing the best we can. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bless you, Howard. That was incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.